Okay, now we have our HTML and we have an object constructor here, backpack, and script. We have used this backpack object and created a dynamic content to display this content in the HTML. So we manipulated the inner HTML of this particular body element. Let's go start the live server. So this is dynamically generated content from the JavaScript. So uh, apart from this selector, we have specific items we can select. So basically, if I have a complex HTML structure, if I want to select a specific element from the DOM tree, I can use query selectors. There is something called query selectors. So if I go to the browser and inspect this, and in the console, if I want to select a specific list element, if I just go see this list, I can actually select a specific list item and then manipulate that item itself. So in order to select these, we need to make use of CSS queries. Basically, what CSS queries will give us is the ability to select specific DOM elements based on a criteria. So the criteria would be like, let's say I have a specific class in an attribute. Let's just go here and add a specific element. Unordered list, I will add list. Um, just add some elements here. And apart from this, I'll just add one paragraph. I'll add one head column. I'll add one more paragraph. Just paragraph with children. Inside this paragraph element, I'm going to have text as well as something like these tags and all. I'll explain when we are discussing HTML. Text. And I will have a detection element here. Inside this, I'll have article. Element. So these things I will cover later. It's just demonstrating a query. Select this. So for this thing, I'm going to add a specific ID and do as an ID. And for this, we'll add classes. And this, I will add the same class. For this, So we have HTML, and we can select this particular elements. We go to the browser. If you see here, second, start HTML. Okay. JavaScript is replacing the entire content of body. That's the reason we want to put this. Let's comment out this part for now. Okay. Now we have this entire text. To inspect this particular element, we can see that it has a class called highlight. The spelling. So let's say I want to select this particular paragraph element and any element that has the class highlight in it. So highlight is there in paragraph and in this list. So these two elements, if I want to select, I can actually select it with the CSS query. I'll just quickly demonstrate a CSS query here. I'll just highlight this with a class. Inside here, I'm going to write a simple CSS style. All this we will explain when we are discussing HTML and CSS. This is, as we are discussing the query selector now, it's important to know the CSS selectors. So for this, selecting a specific class elements is through dot notation. If some element has a dot highlight as a class, it will select all that elements, and I'm going to select background as outline and just change that to outline. I'm going to pixel solid. This will highlight these elements. This element has highlight class and this element has highlight class. If you see inspect this list has a class of highlight and this thing has a class of highlight. So same thing, we can actually select with JavaScript also. Document object refers to the entire document object, DOM tree. So if I want to select these specific elements, I can just do document.query selector. There are two things, query selector and query selector all. So what query selector does is it will select the first element that is matching the query, and query selector all will select all the elements that are matching the query. Let's use the query dot highlight. This will give us the first element that is matching this. So if you inspect this, this is the first element that is matching this criteria. It gives that element. So I can just change the inner HTML of this to my custom text. If I execute this, it will change this text. Reload and show it again. Observe this. The second element is going to be selected with this. And in the HTML, I'm going to change it to my custom text. I've changed this. with this query selector. Now, what if I want to iterate through the entire list of all matching elements? So this highlight is actually matching two elements. If I do query selector all, it will give me two elements, not list of two elements. First element is the list element, this one. And second, this one. And second element is this one. Just expand the second element. Second element is the paragraph element. So if I want to manipulate each of these one by one, I can actually use for each loop. Of this syntax we will cover next. The for loops we will cover in JavaScript. So for each of the document.l query selector, so a simple way to do it is store this result in a variable. Let's create a variable. My elements is document query selector all of dot highlight. Now if I print my element, this has two items, two elements in it. First, let element of my elements. If I just do console log of element of inner HTML, console. So we can see all the inner HTML of these two elements. I'll just reload and execute. I have to first fetch the elements, then iterate through that, and we are printing this text and this text. This is how we select specific elements with CSS queries. So we will also discuss CSS queries, not just this query class selectors. We also have ID selectors. I want to select a specific element which has an ID of this. I can actually use it with document.query selectors of hash. Any ID selection will start with hash. Any class selection will start with dot. The element has a class highlight. If I want to select that element, I need to start it with dot. And if it has an ID, I should select it with hash symbol. So basically the difference between a class and an ID is multiple elements can have same class, but not same IDs. So ID is unique to specific element. This is to segregate or isolate specific objects, DOM elements in the DOM tree. So apart from this, we can also select attribute-based selectors also. I'll show you that next. So if I want to select an element which has a ID as many two, I can do it with this. So let me select the document, sorry, the document. So now it's selected the list item here, menu two. So we can manipulate by selecting any element like this. And we will cover in depth into these query selectors, CSS selectors, when we are covering CSS overall. So for now, I'll just park this one and we'll go back to our JavaScript example here. So let's go create an new functionality on top of backpack using global objects. So we also have seen there is global object called date. So we'll make use of this global object and put some age to this backpack element, backpack object. So let's say I want the age property of also for this, like how old is the backpack? When was it bought? Something like that. So in the constructor, I'm going to add a new field, date acquired, when it was bought, date bought, or date bought, or I'll just bought on. So this time, so when this, so I'm going to initialize the bought on date as bought on. Now, based on the date that we bought it, we can actually find out the age of this using the date object. Right now, in this bought on, we are going to pass in a string, a date string. Let's go to my script. When we are creating this my backpack object, we'll just use a date string to specify the date on which we bought. Let's add something like December 25th, 2024 at 3 p.m. I list it. This is a date string that the data object will understand. So we can specify it in any format, but this is a standard way to pass. So now when we are constructing this object, we are taking that string and storing this also as a string. But in order to find out the age, so we have to find out the current date and the bought on date. Let's say how old. Let's create a function called how old. And this time, this is not going to accept any parameters. I'm going to create a new date element. Just 1 second. I'm getting it started. So here's how old. Let's find out the current date with new date. So new date actually gives us the current date. This will give the current date. We have to find out what is the current date. This is now. And we want to convert the date that this was acquired. So new date of this dot bought on. If I do this, let's just go create a new date object which has December 25th, 2024. I'll just put it like this. So this gives us the date in the date object format. It will convert the string date, this date into the date object that the browser understands. So this is going, now we will be able to compare this date and this date. Select bought on. It's now we can actually take a difference of these two and find out the age of the bag. Let's say elapsed time. So now will be the greater than the bought on date, which is older date. Bought on and now the difference between now and bought on. JavaScript knows how to differentiate between, like if I do a minus on a date object, it will basically calculate the delta of the dates. It knows how to do date arithmetic. So this time I'm going to use a math function to this elapsed time will give us time in milliseconds. So how much time had been elapsed from the spot on date to current date. This will give us a number. If I just do something like this, date minus date of December 2025. This is a milliseconds. How many milliseconds have passed since this date to current date? So current date also actually is going to calculate the number of milliseconds elapsed from a specific time in history. So this gives us milliseconds. For that milliseconds, we need to convert that into days now. So how many days have been elapsed per 1 point? Let days elapse equals elapsed divided by. If we divide by 1000, it will give the seconds, number of seconds. And then we have to again divide by 60 seconds per minute, and then 60 minutes per hour, and then 24 hours per day. So this is the calculation that we need to do in order to find out the number of days elapsed. So this thing will give a division in a floating point element. I do this, it will give us something like, I divide this by 1000 into 60 and 24. It will give us a floating point number. This is giving a decimal number. So we need to convert this into a rounded integer. Okay, this thing is not working because actually I forgot to add the brackets over here. We are actually going to divide this entire thing. That is 86 days and 86.41 days, because it's milliseconds and seconds. It will count the seconds also. Unless it is completely elapsed, we don't count it as day, as a rounded number. So if 5 days, 6 days, and 7 hours, if it passed, we will just consider 6 days itself. So for that, there is a function called math.floor, which will be used for rounding off the number to the lowest number. So even if there is a decimal like this, it will round off to 86. Math.floor will do that. Math.round will do the nearest integer. So if it is more than 0.5, math.round will wrap it into 87. Math.floor will actually wrap it to 86, even whatever the number is there on the right side of the decimal place. So we'll use decimal math.floor to find out the days elapsed. We'll return days elapsed. This days elapsed, I'm going to use in the index.html by calling this function, how old. In the script, age, I'm going to call in. So far, we have been using plain properties. We can actually use the functions calls also. I'm at that dot how old. To call the function, I need to specify two parentheses here, opening and closing parentheses. If I don't do that, it will try to access this object as a property in the object, and it is fine. So as this is a function or a method in the object, we need to use this. So now let's go here. It's not a number, it says. Why is that? Return days elapsed. Just let's do one simple thing here. I'll just do a console log of hot on. Let's see why that is. Invalid date. Start hot on. I should not use commands. Hmm. 1500 minus. Let's try using this instead. Last parameter is supposed to be okay. This is working. Let's try creating an object with the date format that we used. Silver 25. Just put IST, it's failing. Okay. Said, I think hands on we should not use. Let's eliminate this. How to specify time zone? We can actually get it from MDN docs. We can do that later. There are ways to do this with IST. It's not the time zone. The ST. Let's try using this. Okay. This way it works. Okay, for IST we need to use this. By default, it will take the current time zone. In India, it is IST, which is plus 530 hours. So let's print this age also. Now we have the age. We are constructing this age from this parameter, and we are good with that. So that's how we use global objects. We have used date object and math object here. So we have some template literals, string concatenation. We have some query selector. We can actually manipulate classes. Now we have used query selectors to manipulate HTML text. Now we will use this to actually manipulate the classes. Let's go comment out this portion. Log this. This time, what we are going to do is tell this I'm going to add a new class with JavaScript. So I'm going to select an element, document dot very selectors of highlight. I'm going to store this in a variable that element equals this. So what I'm going to do is here I'm going to add a new class to this particular element. Yep. So if I want to print existing classes, I can do it with element dot class name. And there are two properties here. So one is class name, and there is another thing called class list. So a list of classes we will get with class list, and class name will give us only the class names in a string form. If I want to edit the class name of it, I can actually do dummy class like this. It will replace the entire class list. So the highlighting is gone because if we inspect this, the entire previous class list has been replaced by the new class name. So if I want to just add it rather than remove it, I can make use of class list object. Now reload this. Let's do document same selector will use. So this time element dot class list we will use. Class list object has all these functions for adding and removing classes. So I'm going to use add function, add a new class. So now if I go to this element and see, it has both classes, highlight and new class. Similarly, I can actually remove the class if you want. Remove a class name. If I go back, here you can see that the class has been removed. Let's say there is another function called toggle. If the class exists, it will remove toggle. Let's use toggle. So if the class exists on the element, it will remove it. If it does not exist, it will add it. Let's do that once. Now if you see, new class has been added. If I do one more time, same thing. New class has been removed. So that's a toggle function. Let's say we will see an expression called replace. Replace will take the new class first, old class first. Highlight, and the new class will be new highlight. Let's try this. If I go back, the class has been changed from highlight to new highlight. So that's about class manipulation with JavaScript. Similarly, we have attributes. If you want to see attributes, all the attributes, that's the ID of these and everything else, we can actually select this document query selector of highlight. Now this time, highlight, this does not have the highlight class because we removed it, replaced it with new highlight. Only this element gets selected. If you print the element, we have the paragraph element here. Now, if I want to see all the attributes, I can actually see the elements attributes like this. All the attributes will be coming as a node map. we have a class attribute appears. If I will add one attribute to this, let's say I will add ID also to this. Right? Parent and reload. I'll remove this highlight also. Highlight. This time, let's reload, select element with the class name highlight. Let's see element attributes. So it has ID attribute and class attribute. ID attribute has name as ID. Similarly, class attribute has name as class and the value, not value, will be highlighted. Similar to this value here, highlight. For ID, we can see the value as my paragraph. Basically, these are new IDs, new classes we can dynamically add based on certain criteria in our JavaScript code. And based on the IDs and classes, we could have CSS styles written. Then when I add a new class to an element, automatically the browser will see the corresponding styling properties of that class and apply those styles to that element. So this is how we dynamically change content in HTML DOM. So if I want to manipulate styles of a specific object, let's create. Same thing, we will just select this paragraph element. We'll just change the background color of it from JavaScript. Same thing we can do it with CSS, but if we want to dynamically change based on certain criteria, we can do it with this element dot style. If you see, so this gives us the entire styling of this element. If you scroll over there and see the border property, outline property, outline will be something. CSS we have defined as highlight as outline. So this only gives us the properties of this particular element if it is only applied to this element, inline properties. What do I mean by inline property? Let's go here. For this element, I can actually define styles over here. Style I can define like this. Color, red. A reload. The color of it got changed. It's actually an inline property of this element. So I'm not applying this styles from a styling or CSS. It's inline to this particular element. You can actually add the CSS rules inline. So this element, when we display in element.style, it only gives the inline CSS rules of that particular element of it. It doesn't show us the overall applied CSS. It only gives us the inline CSS. If you see here, this inline CSS only color is there. Color. So if you see color, color is red. I just specify outline as 2 pixels solid blue. That also comes here. And print element style and expand it. So outline is blue solid 2 pixels. So this is a shorthand way of assigning colors and then style and then grid. So these things we will discuss in a later chapter or later lesson. So this is how we get the attributes and styles of an element. So also we can actually manipulate this style by just adding this property. Whatever property we want to change, color I will just change it to blue, and I'll just change the background color to. So one difference between element styles here and in the JavaScript is that if I specify color, background color as black here. Here, the background and color will be separated by hyphen, whereas in here, in JavaScript, background color will be in the camel case. This is called camel case syntax. So this exactly translates into this. By specifying here, payload, you see the background color from the element, it's black. So now if I change this to blue, it's blue. So in CSS, we will specify it with hyphens, and in JavaScript, we specify with camel case letters. Like this. That's the only difference. What's next is that, okay, I think that's all for query selectors. Next thing is to go in depth into JavaScript constructs like variables, indices, data types, variables, functions, methods, and all that. We will do that in the next class. So we will also cover HTML and CSS once we cover the basics of JavaScript. So we also now have a brief idea on this.